I've been knocked sideways today by the books in these two boxes. I bought them simply because they were beautiful, but as I researched them, I uncovered a tragic story. So today I'm going to take you on that journey of discovery we travel when we're researching old books. I'll show you both books up close and the clues we have to their history. Then we can discover who made them and why, and see their tragedy that left me in pieces. I bought these books because they're beautiful book bindings and they're housed in their original boxes, which is a really promising start. If you're looking at a book afresh and you see that it's a book binding in its original box, that's a really good sign, because the chances are it's still going to be in beautiful condition because it's had the box protecting it. These would have been custom made by the original book binder, which gives an indication of the value of the binding, the fact that someone's probably, possibly paid a reasonable amount of money to have it made, but also the care and attention that is going into protecting the book. So let me open them up and I'll show you what we have and what I experienced when I first opened them up earlier on. So this is the first one here, and we can open it up and we can see a beautiful book bound in red Morocco. I'm just going to set the book down while I take it out of the box. This is the smaller of the two boxes, and you can see that this is a red Morocco binding of a very good quality on a book called The Life of Florence Nightingale by Sarah Tooley, and you can see here the date in Roman numerals 1910. We've got lettering in gilt to the upper cover, gilt rules. On the spine we have really stylish, I think, decoration. We've got 5 raised bands. Now these don't go all the way to the edge of the binding, they stop just short, and you have these 3 gilt dots to each of the bands, and obviously our spine lettering. All the edges are gilt, and then the thing that intrigued me most about this binding when I first opened it up is we have here someone's name. This is the front board, and on the turn-ins, which we call the turn-ins, these pieces of leather that extend round and cover the edges of the front board, Nellie Fyson, her book is what we have here, with also ruled decorations. We see repeats of these lovely, very delicate gilt dots, and little floral pieces in the corners. And then on the back cover we have another inscription, as it were, in gilt, Ex Donne AJG, which basically means from. So in this case it's saying Ex Donne from, and then we have somebody's initials, AJG. So this is a book given to someone called Nellie Fyson, her book, from AJ. It's no surprise that this is a gift because of the beauty and the quality of the binding. So my first thought here is that this is something that's been commissioned to give as a present to this person called Nellie Fyson. And as you can see, this binding is 114 years old, and it is immaculate, absolutely pristine, thanks to the box that's housed it, and I think it's fair to say the care of the people who have owned it in the intervening 114 years. So that's our first book, The Life of Florence Nightingale. The second book is in this larger box. You can see actually this box is a bit stained and a bit worn, and that's actually because the book in it is quite heavy. And if we open it up, the first thing you'll see, let me do this in front of the camera, like a good creator. So I opened it up and I saw it had this lovely cloth covering around it. And I can't really do a reveal because this book is too heavy to safely show you on camera and fold it open. But that green cloth, when you pull it back, reveals the most beautifully decorated cover. We had quite a restrained decorative scheme on the Florence Nightingale book, but this is a copy of Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens. You can see the book is much bigger, and we have beautiful tooling. This is the front cover here, and the same repeater to the back cover, and then we have our lettering to the spine. So the decorative scheme here, we've got these wonderful butterflies in the corners of the binding, and then various sort of foliage and floral decoration all the way around the outside of the binding. And again, a really beautiful, this is more of a burgundy, whereas the previous book was a bright red, but a really beautiful, highly polished burgundy Morocco here. The lettering to the spine is relatively simple, Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, and we have these raised bands here, gilt rules in the compartments. And this was a really nice touch, I thought. And that was that you have these vellum panels. So again, we've got leather turn-ins. These aren't signed Nellie Feiss and her book and so on. But we do have a signature here. And it's blind stamped. It's a binder's signature. And I'm really not sure that you'll be able to make this out on camera, so I might have to overlay a photograph or a video of it. But this is the binder's stamp of the binders who made the book. Again, it's not tooled in gilt, it's just in blind, which means the impression is made into the leather, but nothing's added on top of it. And it says J.P. Gray and Son, Cambridge. So this is the identity now of our binder. Really, really important. Now we know who bound this book. Possibly they bound both books because they're both in very similar clamshell boxes and came from the same source. But, you know, ultimately, who knows on that point? And then I started to look inside the book because this is a beautiful book. This is Peter Pan in Kensington Gardens, the first Peter Pan book by J.M. Barrie, illustrated by Arthur Rackham. And this is actually not the first edition, but an edition that came out in 1912. You can see, does it say here? Yes, it says a new edition here. And it's a new edition because this is in a much nicer format than the first edition. You have the plates interspersed throughout the text. You have beautiful tipped in colour plates under caption tissue guards. So you can see the frontispiece illustration here if I carefully show it to you. So these are all tipped in on lovely mounts under tissue guards. So you have Arthur Rackham's illustrations throughout the book. But the thing that caught my eye was an inscription on the title page here. And it says, "To Nell, from Arthur, 1913. Now, you might be thinking that, you know, oh, I wonder if that's Arthur Rackham, because then this book would be inscribed by the illustrator. And that would be a very, very nice thing. But this isn't. To my eyes, in a fairly romantic way, this is much better. And we'll get onto why as we go through this video. But here we have To Nell, from Arthur, 1913. And the previous book was given to Nellie Feissen. So I'm now thinking they're the same person. This is From Arthur. And again, the previous book we looked at was from AJG. So I'm now wondering whether both books were given to the same person. So what we have to go on evidence-wise here is our Nell or Nellie Feissen. We see her as Nell here and Nellie in the other book. So what I did is I started to do a bit of research on who Nell or Nellie Feissen might be, and here's what I found. I just googled her name, and there's a wonderful website called Capturing Cambridge, which is run by the Museum of Cambridge, and I can see that Eleanor Feissen lived just outside of Cambridge in Feissen Farm in Fen Ditton. She was born in 1890, which means she would have been 20 years old when she was given the Florence Nightingale book, and the Peter Pan that was inscribed in 1913, that would have had her at, 22, maybe 23 years old, so a young girl. And this is what it says on the entry for Feissen Farm in Fen Ditton on the Capturing Cambridge website. Eleanor Feissen was born in 1890 and lived with her family on Feissen Farm in Fen Ditton. she trained as a nurse. And this is interesting, of course, because this is the life of Florence Nightingale, so a particularly appropriate gift to Eleanor, aged 20, and I imagine at that point already training to be a nurse, maybe even practicing as a nurse. And following the death of her fiancé, Arthur Gray, a bookbinder in Green Street, her career took her to several places abroad, including Egypt. And when I first read that earlier on, it absolutely stopped me in my tracks, because the Arthur that inscribed this beautifully bound copy of Peter Pan to Nell from Arthur, 1913, is clearly someone called Arthur Gray, who was a bookbinder. And then we have this book, Nellie Fyson, her book, Ex Dono A.J.G. And we have Arthur Gray being the person who gave it to her. So obviously Arthur Gray's middle initial was J, and he was a bookbinder. So did he bind these books for her? Well, let's have a look. And again, on the Capturing Cambridge website, I can click through to Arthur Gray's information, and it takes us to an entry for 10 Green Street in Cambridge. And we learn that 10 Green Street is the premises of, founded in the 1860s, of a bindery run by someone called John Phillips Gray, J.P. Gray. And we remember that the person who bound this volume in the signature here was J.P. Gray and Son. Now, it turns out John Phillips Gray was Arthur Gray's grandfather. John Phillips Gray had a son, the son of J.P. Gray and Son, called Arthur Beals Gray. He was in his 40s at the time these books were bound. And the 1911 census records for 10 Green Street, the location of the bindery, tells us that at that time, 1910, 1911 even, the year after this was bound, and just before our Peter Pan was bound, Arthur John Gray, aged 19, was a bookbinder working at the firm. So here we have not just beautiful books in immaculate condition, but romantic gifts made by Arthur John Gray for Nellie Fyson. So the Ex Dono AJG that we see in this volume is very much saying, this was made by me for you. The care given to the books in housing them in these boxes, and the preservation that they've had for more than a century now, almost keeping them in a time capsule level of condition, that when Arthur first gave Nell these books, they would have looked exactly as they do now. So what happened? Well, this is where the story took a turn, because staying on the Capturing Cambridge website, we read that they became engaged, maybe around the time of these bindings, maybe shortly afterwards. But it's tough talking about young men and women in the years 1910, 1913, 1914, because we all know what's coming. And Arthur John Gray, the boy, really, he was a boy, who bound these volumes, was commissioned into the 1st Cambridgeshire Battalion in the First World War. He joined in 1915, and actually in looking around I managed to find some medals that he'd won. So we have Nell working as a nurse, later across the world, but at this time we think still at home. She was at home with the books. And Arthur was sent to the Western Front with the 1st Cambridgeshire Regiment. He joined the regiment as a sub-lieutenant in 1915 and served on the Western Front for the next couple of years. He will have been allowed home at times over the next couple of years and been able to see Nell, see the family. But in July 1917, he was sent to Ypres. Ypres had already been a massive killing ground of the war. And in July 1917, on the 31st of July 1917, was the first day of one of the bloodiest battles of the whole godforsaken conflict, the Battle of Passchendaele. And I mean, I have it sat in front of me now in black and white, and it makes me feel utterly, utterly empty. But Arthur was killed in action on the first day of fighting at the Battle of Passchendaele, the 31st of July, 1917. And it shows you what books can do to us and how special they are. I bought these as aesthetic objects. I saw they were in their original boxes, guessed that they must still be in beautiful condition, and thought, gosh, they'll look really nice. I'm sure I can find a customer for those. And what I've discovered instead, thanks to literally, a bit of gilt on leather here and here, an inscription in a copy of Peter Pan to Nell from Arthur, and a barely visible binder's signature at the base of this turn-in, is this awful story of loss. I mean, I guess that's the end of the video. That's what you find when you look into the lives of people who lived in this time. He made beautiful and permanent things for the girl he loved. And we have that of him, at least, I suppose. But there's really no way I can find to sign off this video. So I'll just stop recording. I hope you enjoyed seeing the story behind these books. Enjoyed is probably not the right word. I'll see you next week.